The great hall of Blackwood Castle was a sea of noise and intoxicating power. Alphas from a dozen packs across the northern territories were here, their laughter like rumbling thunder, their presence a physical weight in the air. For them, this was a night of diplomacy and feasting. For Sierra, it was a minefield. She was an Omega, the lowest of the low, and her only purpose was to be invisible, to serve, to refill, and to disappear. "Oh!" Omega, a voice like poisoned honey, called out. Sierra's heart leaped into her throat. She froze, her knuckles white around the heavy silver tray laden with wine glasses. She knew that voice, Vanessa Ashford, daughter of the King's Beta, beautiful, cruel, and the self-proclaimed future Luna Queen. "Another glass for Lord Garrett," Vanessa purred, gesturing with a perfectly manicured hand towards a hulking alpha with a scarred face and cruel eyes. Sierra bowed her head lower, murmuring a quiet, "Yes, Miss Ashford." She moved carefully, her worn leather slippers silent on the floor. Lord Garrett didn't even look at her as she reached to place the glass on the table beside him. He was too busy boasting about a recent hunt. Sierra's hand was steady, the glass almost safely on the table, when a sharp, deliberate shove sent her stumbling. The world seemed to move in slow motion. The silver tray tilted. The crystal glasses slid, catching the light like falling stars before they crashed against the marble. But worst of all, the full decanter of deep red wine arced through the air, drenching the front of Lord Garrett's pristine white tunic. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. The thunderous laughter died, replaced by a silence so absolute it was louder than the noise before. Sierra was on her hands and knees, surrounded by shattered glass and a pool of dark red wine that looked disturbingly like blood. Her entire body trembled. Lord Garrett looked down at his stained tunic, his face contorting into a mask of pure fury. His eyes, a muddy brown, flashed with a dangerous light. "You clumsy little whelp," he snarled, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the floor. I am so sorry, my lord," Sierra whispered, her voice barely audible. "It was an accident. An accident." Vanessa's voice cut through the silence, dripping with false sympathy. "Oh, Sierra, you are always having accidents. Perhaps you are simply not fit to serve." Garrett's massive hand shot out, grabbing a fistful of Sierra's hair and yanking her head back. A pained cry escaped her lips. She was forced to look up, her emerald green eyes wide with terror. "An Omega who can't even serve is useless," Garrett spat, his foul breath washing over her face. "Perhaps she needs a lesson in her place." He grabbed the half-empty decanter from the table. "You spilled my wine. It seems only fair you wear it." He tipped the decanter, and the remaining wine cascaded over her head, cold and sticky, soaking her hair and running down her face in crimson rivers. Laughter erupted from Garrett's warriors. Humiliation burned hotter than any fire, and tears pricked at Sierra's eyes, mixing with the wine. "Now lick it up," Garrett commanded, shoving her face towards the puddle on the floor. "Lick my boots clean, you worthless trash." The entire hall watched. No one moved. No one spoke a word to defend her, to interfere with another alpha's discipline, especially one as volatile as Garrett, was to invite a challenge, and no one would risk that for a nameless Omega. From the raised dais at the end of the hall, Alpha King Dominic Blackwood had been listening to a report from his beta, Marcus Ashford. He had been ignoring the feast, his mind on border disputes and rogue wolf packs. But then, a scent cut through the thick air of roasted meat and ale. It was a scent that didn't belong here, ethereal and wild. Jasmine, freshly bloomed after a cool forest rain. It was the most intoxicating thing he had ever smelled, and it pulled at something ancient and primal within him. His wolf stirred, lifting its head, sniffing the air with a desperate need. Mate. His gaze swept the hall, his amber eyes sharp and predatory. He searched for the source, his senses on fire, and then he saw her. A small, trembling figure on the floor, soaked in red wine, her head bowed in utter degradation. The scent was coming from her. This girl was his mate, the one destined for him by the moon goddess herself. A roar of pure, unadulterated rage built in his chest, so powerful it threatened to shatter his human control. His wolf clawed at the inside of his soul, screaming, "Mine, protect, kill them." Every instinct he possessed demanded he leap from his throne, rip Garrett's throat out, and cradle his mate in his arms. But his mind, cold and strategic, held him back. If he claimed her now, like this, he would paint a target on her back for every rival, every enemy he had. She was an omega, vulnerable and unknown. They would see her as a weakness, a tool to be used against him. Protecting her required cunning, not just brute force. He stood, his towering 6'4" frame casting a long shadow over the hall. The room fell into an even deeper silence. His eyes, now glowing with a faint golden light, were fixed not on Sierra, but on Lord Garrett. His voice was not a shout, but a blade of ice that cut through the tension. Enough. The word was quiet, yet it held the absolute authority of a king. Garrett froze, his hand still tangled in Sierra's hair. Dominic's gaze flickered to the girl on the floor for a fraction of a second, his expression unreadable. Then, he looked at his royal guard. "Take this Omega to the Shadow Tower," he commanded, his voice devoid of any emotion. "No one is to approach her. No one." Vanessa, standing nearby, smirked with triumph. The Shadow Tower was where prisoners were held before execution. She believed her little plan had worked perfectly. She had removed the distracting Omega and shown her own intolerance for incompetence. The guards hauled Sierra to her feet. Her legs barely held her. She was confused, terrified, her mind reeling. The Shadow Tower execution. She risked a glance toward the throne, toward the formidable king whose cold command had just sealed her fate. For a fleeting moment, her terrified green eyes met his glowing amber ones. She felt a strange jolt, a dizzying sense of recognition that made no sense. Then the guards were dragging her away, her feet stumbling on the marble. She was leaving the great hall, leaving the humiliation behind, only to be led to what she was certain was her death. And the last thing she saw was the cruel, satisfied smile on Vanessa Ashford's beautiful face. The world swam back into focus slowly. First, the scent of lavender and old stone. Then, the impossible softness beneath her. Sierra's eyes fluttered open. She wasn't in a cold, damp cell. She was in a bed. A massive, 4-poster bed draped in deep blue silk that felt like cool water against her skin. Panic seized her. She sat up, clutching the sheets. The room was circular, its stone walls warmed by a crackling fireplace. A tall, arched window looked out not onto a barren courtyard, but over the vast, moonlit expanse of the Black Moon Forest. This wasn't a prison. It was a queen's chamber. The heavy wooden door creaked open, and an elderly woman entered, carrying a tray. She had kind, crinkled eyes and gray hair tied in a neat bun. She offered Sierra a gentle smile. "Ah, you're awake. Dear, I am Rose. I've brought you some broth." Sierra flinched back against the headboard. Where am I? What is this place?" "This is the Shadow Tower, child," Rose said, her voice soothing. She set the tray down on a nearby table. "And you are safe here. The king himself gave the order. You are to be cared for." The king's order, Sierra's mind spun. The last thing she remembered was his cold voice sentencing her to this very tower. She thought it was a death sentence. Cared for, but why I disgraced him? I disgraced his guest. Rose's smile was sad. The Alpha King has his reasons. Child, they are not for us to question. She gestured around the opulent room. This tower has been sealed for 15 years. It was the private residence of the late Queen Elise. His mother... Sierra looked around in awe. Queen Elise's chambers, the legendary Luna who had died so tragically. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Why would the king put a lowly Omega in his mother's sacred rooms? It made no sense. "Rest now," Rose said kindly. "I will bring you a fresh gown. Yours was soiled." After Rose left, Sierra shakily got out of bed. Her reflection in a tall, silver-frame mirror startled her. Her face was clean, her hair washed and brushed, though still damp. Someone had cared for her while she was unconscious. She explored the room, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on a wooden bookshelf. Most of the books were poetry or histories of the werewolf clans. Tucked away on the bottom shelf, she found it, a leather-bound journal with a faded silver clasp. The initials E.B., Elise Blackwood, were embossed on the cover. Her heart pounded as she opened it. Most of the pages had been torn out, leaving only jagged remnants, but a few entries remained. Written in elegant, flowing script, they spoke of love for her son, Dominic, and a deep, growing unease about a shadow that was falling over their pack. The last intact entry was chilling. "He does not see the danger. Love has blinded him, and I fear it will be the death of us all." That night, sleep would not come. Sierra stood by the window, gazing at the sea of silver-tipped trees under the full moon. A presence. She felt it before she saw anything, a sudden shift in the air, a prickling on her skin that was both terrifying and strangely comforting. Her empathic sense, the secret ability she kept hidden from everyone, flared to life, tasting a storm of emotions from nearby profound loneliness, fierce protectiveness, and a deep, aching grief. She pressed herself into the shadows of the window frame, her breath catching in her throat. There, on the adjoining balcony, stood a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, silhouetted against the moon, the Alpha King. Dominic didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there, his gaze fixed on her window, on the room where she was. He didn't enter. He simply watched, a silent, brooding guardian in the night. Sierra could feel the war raging inside him, the raw, primal instinct of his wolf wanting to crash through the doors and claim what was his, held in check by the cold, disciplined mind of a king who had learned loss too young. She didn't dare move, didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. She just watched the watcher, a strange connection arcing between them in the silent darkness. Dominic's POV short segment. He stood on the cold stone of the balcony, the wind doing nothing to cool the fire in his blood. He could smell her. Jasmine and rain. She was just through that wall, in his mother's bed. His mate. The reality of it was a physical blow. He closed his eyes, and the memory he fought every day clawed its way to the surface. His father, King Alaric, standing over the body of his mate, Queen Elise, a silver blade in his chest. He had died trying to shield her from a rogue attack, an ambush set by ick enemies. His father, the strongest alpha he had ever known, brought down by a single weakness love. His mother had not survived his father's death. Not really. The light in her eyes had died that day. A few weeks later, she had followed him into the next life, leaving a 13-year-old Dominic to become king. On that day, he had sworn an oath. He would never be that weak. He would never have a mate. He would never let love become a weapon that his enemies could use against him. For 15 years, he had held to that vow. He had built a reputation for being ruthless, cold, untouchable. And now, the moon goddess had sent her, a small, fragile Omega who had looked at him with the terrified eyes of a cornered fawn. His wolf howled in protest at his distance, begging him to go to her, to comfort her, to mark her as his. But the boy who had watched his parents die screamed louder, "Protect her, keep her secret, keep her safe." And the only way he knew how to do that was to keep her locked away, even from himself. He was the most dangerous thing to her in this entire kingdom. In the 3 days that followed, A chill settled over Blackwood Castle, and it had nothing to do with the autumn weather. Whispers slithered through the stone corridors. One of Lord Garrett's most boisterous warriors, the one who had laughed the loudest at Sierra's humiliation, had been found dead in the training yard, a freak accident. The official report said a sparring axe had slipped. Lord Garrett wasn't a fool. He knew there was no such thing as a freak accident in a yard full of seasoned warriors. He suspected the king's hand but had no proof. He couldn't openly accuse the Alpha King without igniting a war he couldn't win. For now, he could only watch and wait, a bitter taste in his mouth. Meanwhile, Vanessa Ashford was growing increasingly agitated. The Omega Girl, Sierra, hadn't been executed. She hadn't been thrown in the dungeons. Instead, she had vanished into the sealed Shadow Tower, and an elite unit of the Royal Guard was now posted around its base. No one went in or out, save for the old servant, Rose. This wasn't the outcome Vanessa had planned. Dominic was supposed to have disposed of the girl, rewarding Vanessa for her sharp eyes and loyalty. Instead, he was protecting her. The thought was absurd, yet it gnawed at her. Determined to get answers, she chose her moment carefully. She waited until late in the evening, when she knew Dominic would be alone in his study, poring over maps and reports. She wore a gown of deep crimson silk that clung to her curves, her golden hair cascading over her shoulders. She didn't knock, simply entering with a confident smile. "Dominic," she said, her voice a low purr, "working so late, you must be exhausted." He didn't look up from the map spread across his massive oak desk. "What is it?" "Vanessa." His voice was flat, impatient. She moved closer. Trailing her fingers along the edge of the desk, she leaned forward slightly, offering him a view of her cleavage. "I was just concerned. The mood in the castle is tense. First the incident at the feast, and now this accident with Garrett's man." "It is being handled," he said, finally lifting his eyes. They were cold, hard amber. There was no trace of desire in them, only irritation. "Of course," she said quickly. "It's just, everyone is wondering about the Omega. Why take her to the Queen's Tower if she needed to be punished? The dungeons would suffice. If she is a threat—" "She is neither," Dominic cut her off, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "Her fate is my concern, not yours, and not everyone's." Vanessa's smile tightened. She tried a different approach, her voice softening. "I have known you since we were children. Dominic, I only want what is best for you, for our kingdom. I always thought that one day I would stand by your side as your Luna." He stood up, the sudden movement making her take a step back. He was a mountain of controlled power, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of genuine fear. "I have told you many times. Vanessa," he said, his voice like chipping stone, "you are the daughter of my beta. You are a respected member of this pack. That is all you will ever be to me. Do not make the mistake of thinking otherwise again." Humiliation and fury warred on her face, but she masked it with a practiced nod. "I understand. My king." She turned and left, her crimson dress swishing behind her, but as she walked down the empty hall, her beautiful face twisted into an ugly snarl. He was hiding something. That pathetic little Omega was the key, and Vanessa swore to the moon and back she would find out why, and she would destroy it. Unbeknownst to her, Dominic was already moving his pieces across the board. That night, another of Garrett's men was arrested, charged with smuggling silver, a crime punishable by exile. The evidence was irrefutable, planted by Dominic's most loyal spy master. The next day, a third warrior who had jeered at Sierra was challenged to a duel over a gambling debt he'd long forgotten. He lost, fatally. Lord Garrett saw the pattern now. It was a silent, methodical purge. The Alpha King was dismantling his war party, one man at a time, all under the perfect guise of pack law and justice. He wasn't just punishing them for insulting an Omega. He was sending a a terrifying, unspoken message. And for the first time in his life, Lord Garrett began to feel true fear. A week passed, a week of luxurious captivity. Sierra had soft beds, warm meals, and beautiful clothes, but she was a prisoner nonetheless. She spent her days reading Queen Elise's fragmented journal and her nights watching the silent, shadowy figure of the king on the balcony. He came every night, without fail, a constant, brooding presence that was both her captor and her strange, distant protector. She felt the bars of her gilded cage closing in. She had to know why. She had to escape. One night, under the sliver of a new moon, she made her move, dressed in simple dark trousers and a tunic she'd found in a wardrobe. She slipped out of her room. She knew the guard rotations by now. Thanks to Rose's unwitting chatter, she moved like a ghost down the winding stone staircase, her bare feet making no sound. But as she reached the bottom, she found her way blocked, not by one guard, but 4. They stood like stone statues, their faces grim. There was no way past. Defeated, she retreated to her room, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. She slumped onto the balcony, burying her face in her hands. Was this to be her life now, locked away forever without explanation? You should not have tried to leave. The voice came from the darkness behind her, deep, resonant, and so close it made her entire body jolt. She spun around. Dominic Blackwood stood there, having stepped from his balcony to hers, melting out of the shadows like he was born from them. This was the first time they had been truly alone, the first time they would speak since that night in the great hall. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Why, she whispered, her voice trembling. She forced herself to meet his gaze. His amber eyes seemed to glow in the dark, intense and overwhelming. Why are you keeping me here? What did I do? He took a step closer, and the air crackled with energy. His scent, pine and winter air and something uniquely him, filled her senses, making her feel dizzy. You did nothing wrong, he said, his voice a low rumble, but you cannot leave this tower. This is a prison, she choked out, a surge of desperate bravery rising within her. You can't just lock me away. I can, he stated, a simple, brutal fact, and I will. It is for your own protection. Her empathic sense was screaming. Underneath his cold, controlled exterior, she felt a hurricane of emotion, rage, not at her, but at the world, a bone-deep sorrow that seemed to have no end, and something else. Something directed at her that was so powerful it stole her breath, a fierce, possessive hunger. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. He took another step. He was so close now she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His gaze dropped to her lips, and his eyes, those captivating amber eyes, began to shift, the gold within them swirling and brightening. His wolf was close to the surface. He lifted a hand, his fingers hesitating just inches from her cheek, trembling with a restraint that was almost violent. I cannot, he rasped, his voice tight with an internal battle she could feel but not understand. He looked at her as if she were both a goddess to be worshipped and a poison he couldn't allow himself to taste. And then, as quickly as he had appeared, he was gone. He stepped back into the shadows of his own balcony and vanished, leaving her alone with the echo of his presence and the wild, chaotic beating of her own heart. Sierra leaned against the cold stone railing, her legs weak, for the first time. A new realization began to dawn. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was something else to him, something important, something dangerous. She felt safe when he was near, protected by his overwhelming power, but she was also more afraid than she had ever been in her life, because she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the storm she felt inside of him had everything to do with her. The Royal Council convened in the strategy room, a chamber of dark wood and flickering candlelight. The mood was somber. The 12 alphas who governed the northern territories with Dominic sat around a massive round table, their faces etched with concern. "Sire," began Beta Marcus Ashford, his voice heavy. He looked older than his 52 years, the stress of the past week evident in the lines around his eyes. "The other packs are growing restless. Lord Garrett has been sending ravens, spreading whispers. They speak of freak accidents and unjust arrests. They say you are changing." From across the table, Lord Valerius, an old and respected alpha, cleared his throat. "3 of Garrett's men are dead or exiled in as many days. My king. And now we hear you have taken an unknown Omega into the sealed tower. These events are connected, are they not?" Dominic sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of stone. He listened to their concerns, his fingers steepled before him. He let the silence stretch, his gaze sweeping over each alpha, daring them to challenge him further. Lord Garrett, who had been granted a seat at the council to plead his case, finally snapped, "This is not justice, it is a purge," he boomed, slamming his fist on the table. "You are targeting my men, for what? For a spilled drink, for putting a clumsy servant in her place." Dominic's eyes narrowed, the amber within them hardening into chips of cold fire. "Your men were not punished for a spilled drink. Garrett," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "Warrior Fenris was killed by his own carelessness with a blade. I have 3 witnesses. Warrior Jorn was exiled for trafficking silver across the southern border, a betrayal to this kingdom. The silver was found in his own quarters. And Warrior Kale lost a lawful duel of honor. Are you suggesting I fabricate evidence and control the outcomes of duels now?" He laid out the logic of each case, his arguments airtight. Backed by pack law and undeniable proof, he had orchestrated everything perfectly. Garrett could only sit there, seething, trapped by the king's brilliant, ruthless strategy. He had been outmaneuvered at every turn. In a shadowed corner of the room, unseen by most, Vanessa Ashford sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She listened to every word, her sharp blue eyes missing nothing. Her father believed the king was merely asserting his dominance over a troublesome lord. But Vanessa knew better. This was too personal, too methodical. This was about the girl. Later that day, she cornered a young kitchen maid who sometimes delivered food to the tower guards. A few silver coins and a veiled threat were all it took. "What have you heard?" Vanessa asked, her voice a sweet whisper. The maid trembled. "Nothing, Miss Ashford, I swear, the guards, they don't talk." "Try harder," Vanessa said, her fingers closing around the girl's wrist, her nails digging in just enough to hurt. The maid whimpered. I heard one of them talking. He said the Alpha King himself goes to the tower. Every night he doesn't go inside. He just watches from the balcony." Vanessa's blood ran cold. Every night, the king himself was standing vigil over a worthless Omega. It wasn't protection. It wasn't punishment. It was an obsession. A cold, hard knot of hatred formed in her stomach. She had loved Dominic since she was 16. She had molded herself into the perfect candidate for his Luna strong, intelligent, beautiful, and from a powerful bloodline, and he was throwing it all away for some nobody. She released the terrified maid. "You will tell no one we spoke," she hissed. Before turning and sweeping away, her mind was already racing, formulating a new plan. If Dominic wouldn't remove the obstacle, she would have to do it herself, and she would make sure it was permanent. The morning sun streamed through the arched window, casting golden light across the room. Sierra was startled from her reading when Rose entered, her face alight with a rare, excited smile. "Good news, child. The king has granted you permission to leave the tower." Sierra's heart leaped with a hope so fierce it hurt. "Truly, I can leave." "You may spend time in the Queen's private garden," Rose clarified, her smile faltering slightly at Sierra's crestfallen expression. "It is fully enclosed, of course, and you will be escorted by guards, but it is fresh air nonetheless." It wasn't freedom, but it was better than stone walls. Eagerly, Sierra followed the guards down the winding stairs and through a small locked door at the base of the tower. She stepped out into a wonderland. The garden was a hidden jewel, surrounded by high, vine-covered walls. A stone fountain trickled in the center, and the air was thick with the scent of late-blooming roses and damp earth. It was peaceful, beautiful, and utterly isolated. And he was there. Dominic stood in the center of a small training circle, stripped to the waist. His bare torso was a landscape of corded muscle and old, faded scars, gleaming with a light sheen of sweat. He moved with a breathtaking grace, his practice sword a blur of silver as he went through a series of complex forms. He was power incarnate, a perfect, deadly predator. He stopped when he saw her, his chest rising and falling with his deep breaths. He didn't seem surprised. It was clear he had orchestrated this. "Good morning, Sierra," he said, his voice smoother than she had ever heard it. He walked towards her, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. She could only manage a small, "My king." He picked up a smaller, lighter blade from a weapon rack. "Rose tells me you spend your days reading. A mind needs exercise, but so does the body." He offered the sword to her, hilt first. "You need to know how to defend yourself." Hesitantly, she took it. The leather-wrapped hilt was smooth in her palm. I don't know how." "I will teach you," he said simply. He positioned himself behind her, his large frame engulfing her small one. "Your stance is wrong. Feet wider apart. Bend your knees." His voice was a low murmur right beside her ear, sending shivers down her spine. His hands settled on her waist to adjust her posture, and where they touched, her skin burned. A jolt of pure electricity, sharp and sweet, shot through her. She gasped, and she felt him tense behind her, his breath hitching. The mate bond, dormant and unrecognized, was flaring to life between them. He moved his hands to cover hers on the sword hilt. "Like this," he breathed, guiding her through a simple block. His chest was pressed against her back, his chin just above her head. She could feel the steady, powerful beat of his heart. She was surrounded by him, his scent, his heat, his power. It was overwhelming, intoxicating. All thoughts of escape, of her captivity, melted away, replaced by the dizzying reality of his closeness. He turned her to face him, their bodies still only inches apart. "Again," he commanded softly. They moved through the basic forms, a slow, mesmerizing dance of steel and unspoken tension. Every time their skin brushed, the spark was there, a silent acknowledgement of the pull between them. Finally, he disarmed her with a deft flick of his wrist, her sword clattering to the ground. He stepped in, trapping her against his body, his hand resting on the small of her back. His amber eyes, now molten gold, stared down into hers. "Why?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Why are you doing this?" "Because," he murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. "The world is a dangerous place, and I need you to be able to protect yourself when I am not there." He lowered his head, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. Her heart was a frantic drum against his chest, her lips parted in anticipation. This was it. He was going to kiss her. But at the last possible second, he froze. The internal war she'd felt on the balcony was back, stronger than ever. A shadow passed over his features. He clenched his jaw, and the golden light in his eyes receded, replaced by the familiar cold amber. He released her and took a step back, the spell broken. The distance between them felt like a chasm. "That is enough for today," he said, his voice once again the clipped, detached tone of a king. "The guards will escort you back to your room." He turned and walked away without another word, leaving her standing alone in the center of the beautiful, empty garden, her lips tingling with the ghost of a kiss that never came. From a high window in the main castle, a serving girl watched the entire exchange. She scurried away as soon as the king left, her heart pounding with the importance of the news she carried. Vanessa Ashford would pay handsomely for this. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and orange, a special delivery arrived for Sierra. It was a small, exquisitely wrapped box, tied with a silk ribbon. Rose brought it to her, her eyes wide with curiosity. "This just came for you, my lady," she said. "The card says it is from a secret admirer." Sierra's brow furrowed. An admirer? No one even knew she was here, except for the king and a few trusted staff. Hesitantly, she opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, were a dozen perfect, handcrafted chocolates, each one a miniature work of art. They smelled divine. A foolish, hopeful thought fluttered in her chest. Could they be from him? From the king? A silent apology for his abrupt departure in the garden. It seemed too romantic for a man as cold and controlled as Dominic, but the thought made her smile. She was lonely and confused, and the simple, anonymous gift felt like a ray of sunshine in her isolated world. "They look wonderful," she said to Rose, offering her the box. "Oh, no, dear, they're for you," Rose insisted with a warm smile. Sierra selected a small, dark chocolate swirl. She bit into it. The taste was rich and decadent, a burst of sweetness on her tongue. For a moment, she closed her eyes, savoring the simple pleasure. Then, the fire started. It began as a sharp cramp in her stomach, quickly escalating into an agonizing, searing pain. It felt like her insides were being twisted and torn apart by sharp claws. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and the room began to spin. She dropped the half-eaten chocolate, clutching her stomach as she collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. My lady, Rose cried, rushing to her side. "What is it? What's wrong?" Sierra couldn't answer. Black spots danced in her vision. The pain was unbearable, a white-hot agony that consumed her. She managed one last, desperate gasp before darkness swallowed her whole. The sound of Rose's panicked screams echoed up the tower. Dominic was in his study when the alarm was raised. The words, "The lady in the tower, she's collapsed," sent a bolt of pure, cold terror through him. He didn't wait for details. He moved. A blur of speed and power, his royal duties forgotten. His only thought, her. He burst into the room to find Sierra lying pale and motionless on the floor, Rose weeping over her. He swept her into his arms. Her body was limp, her skin clammy and cold. A guttural roar of fury and fear tore from his throat, the sound of a beast whose mate has been harmed. His eyes, now blazing gold, fell on the open box of chocolates and the one dropped on the floor. He didn't need to examine it to know. Poison. "Get the pack healers!" Now he bellowed at the guards who had followed him. His voice was the embodiment of command, laced with a terrifying edge of barely controlled violence. "And find the person who sent this box. Find them and bring them to me, alive." He carried Sierra to the bed, his touch surprisingly gentle. He sat beside her, refusing to leave, his large hand enveloping her small, cold one. The pack's chief healer arrived moments later, his face grim. He examined Sierra, then sniffed the chocolate. "Wolfsbane," the healer confirmed, his voice low, a potent strain. "But the dosage is strange. It's not enough to kill a healthy werewolf, but it would cause immense pain. It was a message, a warning." Dominic's jaw was so tight it ached. A warning. Someone knew she was important to him. Someone was testing his defenses. He didn't leave her side all night. He sat in the chair beside her bed, holding her hand, watching the shallow rise and fall of her chest. The cold. Controlled King was gone, replaced by a male terrified of losing his mate before he had ever truly had her. He poured his own alpha strength into her through their nascent bond, a silent, desperate plea to the moon goddess to spare her. Meanwhile, Marcus Ashford led the investigation with ruthless efficiency, but it was a dead end. The gift had been delivered by a castle page who had been given the box by a hooded figure outside the castle gates. There were no witnesses, no scent trail, no clues. The enemy was a ghost, and they had just declared war. Sierra awoke to the feeling of a warm, strong hand holding hers. Her body ached, and her head was fuzzy, but the searing pain was gone, replaced by a dull throb. She opened her eyes, and the first thing she saw was him. Dominic was asleep in the chair by her bed, his head slumped forward, his dark hair falling across his brow. In sleep, the harsh lines of his face were softened. The cold mask of the king had fallen away, revealing a man who looked weary, burdened, and vulnerable. Her heart gave a strange, painful twist. This powerful, terrifying Alpha King had stayed with her all night. As if sensing her gaze, his eyes snapped open. The amber irises were instantly sharp and alert. He sat up straight, releasing her hand as if it had burned him. The king was back. "You are awake," he stated, his voice raspy from lack of sleep. What happened?" she whispered. "You were poisoned," he said, his tone clipped and harsh. "The chocolates, they were laced with wolfsbane." Sierra stared at him, the horror of it slowly dawning. Someone had tried to kill her. Who would do that? Dominic's jaw tightened. "I do not know, but I will find them." He stood up, pacing the room like a caged panther. "This is my fault. I brought you here, thinking I could protect you, but I only made you a more visible target." Sierra struggled to sit up, her muscles protesting. "A target? Why am I a target? I'm nobody. I'm just an Omega." He stopped pacing and turned to face her. The look in his eyes was one of intense, raw conflict. It was as if two powerful forces were at war within him, and she was the battlefield. He was silent for a long time, the tension in the room stretching until it was almost unbearable. "You are not just an Omega," he finally said, the words seeming to be torn from him against his will. "You are not nobody." He walked back to the bed, standing over her. He looked down at her, his expression a maelstrom of emotions she could feel battering against her own senses. Fear, longing, resignation. "Why do you care so much what happens to me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, needing to understand the truth that hung unspoken between them. "I am nothing to you." He let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Nothing. You are everything." He raked a hand through his hair, a sign of agitation that was startling in such a controlled man. He was struggling, fighting a battle she couldn't see. Finally, he seemed to break. His shoulders slumped in a gesture of utter defeat. He met her eyes, and the truth poured out of him, raw and unguarded. "And you are my mate." The words hung in the air, electric and impossible. Sierra's world tilted on its axis. Her mind refused to process it. Mate, his mate, the mate of the Alpha King. "No," she breathed, shaking her head. That's not possible. An Alpha King? His mate can't be an Omega. It's never happened. The Luna must be strong, a Beta or even another Alpha. "Fate does not care for rank or station," Dominic said, his voice heavy with a pain she was just beginning to understand. "Do you think I wanted this? For 15 years, I have prayed to the moon goddess that she would spare me this, that she would not give me a mate." He looked away, his gaze fixed on the dark forest outside the window. "My father was the strongest Alpha I ever knew, but his love for my mother, his mate, was his one vulnerability. Our enemies knew it. They used her to lure him into a trap. He died protecting her, and she could not live without him. Her grief destroyed her. Their love, their fated bond, destroyed our family and almost destroyed this kingdom." He turned back to her, his eyes filled with a torment that mirrored her own shock. I swore I would never be that weak. I swore I would never give my enemies a weapon to use against me. I have tried to deny this. Sierra, from the moment I scented you in the Great Hall, I have fought it, but I cannot. The bond is there, and now. My enemies sense it too. They did not try to kill you. They tried to hurt you to get to me. Sierra stared at him, her heart a tangled mess of disbelief, terror, and a wild, soaring happiness that she was too afraid to acknowledge. She was his. He was hers. The Alpha King was her mate. And she finally understood. She wasn't his prisoner. She was his weakness. And he had locked her away not to punish her, but to protect himself from the one thing he feared more than any army losing her. Vanessa Ashford paced her chambers like a caged lioness. The plan had failed. Not only was the Omega still alive, but Dominic's reaction had confirmed Vanessa's worst fears. He had stayed by the girl's side all night. He had personally overseen the investigation. This was not the behavior of a king dealing with a servant. It was the behavior of a male protecting his chosen. Her rage was a bitter poison in her veins. She had done everything right, and still, she was losing him to a pathetic, weak creature. As dusk settled, a page delivered a small, unmarked scroll to her door. Curious, she broke the plain wax seal. The message inside was written in an elegant, spidery script. Your ambition is admirable, but your methods are crude. You wish to be queen, yet you act like a common assassin. If you truly desire the throne, meet me at the old standing stones in the whispering woods when the moon is at its darkest. Come alone, a friend. A chill traced its way down her spine. Who could have sent this? Who knew of her ambitions, of her attempt on the Omega's life? It could be a trap, but the message also held a tantalizing promise of help. Desperation won out over caution. 3 nights later, on the new moon, Vanessa slipped out of the castle, cloaked in black. The Whispering Woods was a place most werewolves avoided, rumored to be haunted by ancient spirits. But Vanessa was not afraid of ghosts. She was afraid of losing her future. She reached the circle of moss-covered standing stones. The air was unnaturally still and cold. A figure emerged from the deep shadows cast by the stones. It was a woman, completely enveloped in a dark, hooded cloak that obscured her face. You came? The woman's voice was smooth, ancient, and laced with a power that made the hair on Vanessa's arms stand up. Who are you? Vanessa demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. How do you know who I am? I know many things, the woman said with a dry chuckle. I know you love Dominic Blackwood. I know you believe you are destined to be his Luna. And I know that a little Omega runt has stolen your destiny from you. She's his mate. Vanessa spat, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. He confirmed it. The hooded figure seemed to smile. A mate bond can be severed. You wish to be Luna, I can help you remove the obstacle. Permanently this time. Vanessa was suspicious. Why would you help me? What do you get out of it? Let's just say I have a vested interest in seeing the House of Blackwood brought to its knees, the woman hissed, a flicker of raw hatred in her voice. Dominic's cold arrogance reminds me of his father. I wish to see him suffer. And what better way for an alpha to suffer than to lose his precious mate? The woman's reasoning resonated with Vanessa's own bitter feelings. This mysterious ally hated Dominic as much as Vanessa. Loved him, her emotions were a tangled mess. But one thing was clear, this woman offered her a path to the throne. What do you want me to do? Vanessa asked. The woman produced a small crystal vial from within her cloak. It contained a swirling, iridescent liquid. This is not a common poison. Wolfsbane can be detected. This is different. Odorless, tasteless, a few drops in her wine, and her heart will simply stop. It will look like a sudden, tragic ailment. No one will ever suspect you. Vanessa took the vial, its surface cool against her skin. It felt heavy, weighted with the promise of power and the finality of death. As Vanessa turned to leave, the woman's voice stopped her one last time. "Be patient, child. Your moment will come. Strike when he is most proud of her. When he presents her to the world, the fall will be that much greater." Vanessa nodded and hurried back to the castle, clutching the vial. She didn't know the woman's name, nor did she see her face. She didn't know she was a pawn in a game that had started 20 years ago. Morgana's hidden agenda. In the darkness of the woods, Lady Morgana watched Vanessa's retreating form. A cruel, triumphant smile played on her lips. "Kanyo do kame, my dear child, so easily manipulated." A flashback, sharp and unwelcome, pierced her mind. 24 years ago, the pain of childbirth in a hidden forest cave, she had been a powerful witch, in love with King Alaric, but he had chosen Elise, a mere werewolf, over her. He had not only rejected her love, he had discovered her use of dark magic and exiled her from the kingdom. Pregnant and alone. She had made a choice. The baby, a daughter, was a weakness, a tether to a life she needed to leave behind. Power required sacrifice. She had left the infant wrapped in a blanket at the edge of the forest, with a simple note, knowing the pack's patrols would find her, raise her. She will be of use one day. Then, she had pursued true power, delving into magic so dark it had twisted her soul. She had faked her death and spent 2 decades watching, waiting, nurturing her hatred. And now, her plan was coming to fruition. Her own daughter, the child she had abandoned, would be the instrument of her revenge. She would destroy Dominic's happiness, just as Alaric had destroyed hers. And once the kingdom was in chaos, Morgana would rise from the ashes to claim it all. Dominic knew he couldn't keep Sierra locked in the tower forever. The bond between them, now acknowledged, was a living thing. It needed to be nurtured, or it would fester. And more than that, he needed her to be strong enough to survive in his world. He began spending more time with her, not as a king with a prisoner, but as a male with his mate. He took her to the hidden garden every day, training her with the sword, honing her reflexes. But it was during the nights that the real change happened. One evening, he came to her room. "Come," he said, his voice quiet. "There is something you need to experience." He led her through a secret passage out of the tower and into the moonlit forest. "The bond is not just emotional," he explained. "It is primal. Our wolves need to recognize each other." He looked at her, his amber eyes serious. "Do you trust me, Sierra?" She looked into his eyes, saw the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide, and nodded. "I trust you." A slow, breathtaking smile transformed his face. It was the first time she had seen him truly smile, and it was like watching the sun rise. "Then run with me." He shifted. The change was fluid, violent, and beautiful. Bones cracked and reformed in seconds. The Alpha King was gone, and in his place stood a magnificent wolf. He was enormous, larger than any wolf she had ever seen, with a coat as black as a moonless night and eyes that burned with golden fire. Her own wolf, long suppressed by fear and submission, whimpered within her. It was terrified of this immense power, but it also felt the undeniable pull of its other half. Taking a deep breath, Sierra closed her eyes and let go. Her own shift was less dramatic. She was smaller, leaner. When she opened her eyes, she saw the world differently. Scents were sharper, sounds clearer. She looked down at her paws. Her fur was a shimmering silver, like moonlight on snow. Dominic's massive black wolf approached her slowly. He nudged her gently with his nose, his scent of pine and winter air washing over her. Her fear melted away, replaced by a sense of belonging so profound it felt like coming home. She playfully nipped his ear, and the chase began. They ran. For the first time in her life, Sierra felt truly free. They raced through the ancient forest, silver and shadow weaving between the trees. He was faster, stronger, but he let her lead, nipping at her heels, his deep, rumbling play growls echoing in the night. They hunted together, a perfectly synchronized pair, taking down a stag with an ease that spoke of their innate connection. Later, exhausted and exhilarated, they lay together in a hidden meadow under a canopy of stars. They shifted back to their human forms, lying on a bed of soft moss, their clothes discarded during the shift. The night air was cool on their bare skin. Dominic turned to her, his eyes full of a raw emotion that made her heart ache. He gently tucked a strand of her damp hair behind her ear, his fingers tracing the curve of her jaw. "Sierra," he whispered, his voice thick with a need he no longer tried to hide. He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't like the near kiss in the garden. There was no hesitation, no holding back. It was a kiss of desperation and discovery, of years of loneliness poured into a single, perfect moment. His lips were soft yet firm, moving against hers with a tenderness that belied his immense strength. It was a kiss that spoke of possession, of protection, of a bond finally being sealed. A current of pure fire shot through her veins, igniting every nerve ending. The mate bond flared between them, a tangible thing, and suddenly she could feel him, not just his emotions, but his very soul. She felt his loneliness, his fear of losing her, and his overwhelming, all-consuming love for her. And he felt hers in return, her fear, her awe, and the love that had been quietly growing in the shadow of her fear. As they finally broke apart, breathless, they both knew that something had irrevocably changed. The bond was no longer just a word. It was a living, breathing part of them. But as Sierra lay there, wrapped in his arms, she felt a flicker of something else through her empathic sense, a cold, watching presence from the edge of the woods. It was dark, ancient, and filled with a bitter hatred. She shivered, pressing closer to Dominic. They were being watched, and she knew, with a chilling certainty, that their moment of peace was about to end. Marcus Ashford sat in his study, a glass of amber liquid untouched on his desk. He was a man torn in two, as the king's beta. His loyalty to Dominic was absolute. He had served him for 15 years, had watched the boy become a king, and had sworn to protect him with his life. He knew Dominic had found his mate, and he saw the profound change in his king, a hint of softness behind the steel, a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He should have been happy for him. But he was also a father, and his daughter, Vanessa, was destroying herself. He saw the obsessive gleam in her eyes, heard the venom in her voice whenever the Omega's name was mentioned. He had tried to reason with her, to make her accept the king's choice, but she was deaf to his words. A memory surfaced, one he had buried deep for over 2 decades, the day he'd found her. He'd been on patrol. A young warrior then, a faint cry had led him off the path, to a small bundle wrapped in fine cloth, left at the base of an ancient oak, a baby girl, Vanessa. Beside her was a note, the words seared into his memory. "Raise her. She will be of use one day." He and his mate, who had been unable to conceive, had seen it as a gift from the goddess. They had raised Vanessa as their own, loving her fiercely. He had never told her the truth. He had wanted to protect her from the pain of knowing she was abandoned. Now, he wondered if that silence had been a mistake. Had the ambition he'd seen in her been his own, projected onto her, or was it something innate? The door to his study opened, and Vanessa swept in. She looked pale, her eyes burning with a feverish intensity. "Father," she said, her voice brittle, "you have to do something." Marcus sighed, the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Vanessa, we have been over this. The king has made his choice. His mate has been found. It is the will of the goddess. The goddess made a mistake, she cried, her composure finally cracking. He is the Alpha King. His Luna should be his strength, not his weakness, and Omega, she will get him killed. I love him. Father, I have loved him since I was a girl. I can't. I won't just stand by and watch that little rat destroy everything. Marcus stood, his expression grim. He could see she was teetering on the edge of a dangerous precipice. He had to warn Dominic. He had to tell him that Vanessa was becoming unstable, that her obsession was a threat. It was his duty as Beta. But as he looked at his daughter's tear-streaked face, at the girl he had raised from infancy, his heart ached. To report her would be to condemn her. Dominic's justice was swift and absolute. Daughter, he warned, his voice grave, do not do anything foolish. Do not force my hand. His hand is the one that matters, she whispered bitterly, wiping her tears with an angry gesture, and he has chosen her. She turned and left, leaving Marcus alone with his impossible choice: loyalty to his king, or love for his daughter. He didn't know that by hesitating. He was sealing the fate of them all. The day came. Dominic knew he could no longer hide Sierra. The whispers were turning into roars. The stability of his kingdom depended on his alphas trusting his judgment, and they would not trust a king who kept secrets. He summoned all the alphas and ranking pack members to the Great Hall for a formal announcement. Sierra stood beside him behind the heavy oak doors, her hands trembling. She wore a simple but elegant gown of forest green that brought out the color of her eyes. Her hair was braided with silver ribbons. She looked beautiful, but her face was pale with fear. I can't do this, she whispered, her eyes wide as she listened to the murmur of hundreds of powerful werewolves on the other side of the doors. They'll hate me. They all saw what happened with Lord Garrett. Dominic took her hands in his. They were ice cold. They saw an Omega being humiliated, he said, his voice a low, steady anchor in her sea of panic. Today, they will see a queen. He squeezed her hands gently. I will be right beside you. I will not let anyone harm you. The doors swung open. A hush fell over the great hall as they entered. Dominic walked with his commanding stride, projecting an aura of absolute power. Sierra walked beside him, her head held high as he had instructed. Though it was the hardest thing she had ever done, she could feel the waves of shock, disbelief, and hostility wash over her from the crowd. They reached the raised dais, and Dominic turned to face the assembly. Sierra stood at his side, her hand clutching his for support. I have called you here today to put an end to the rumors and whispers, Dominic began, his voice ringing with authority. For many years, this kingdom has been without a Luna, the moon goddess. In her wisdom, has seen fit to end that time. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then he raised Sierra's hand, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, daring anyone to challenge him. I present to you Sierra Flynn, he declared, his voice booming through the hall. My fated mate, your Luna Queen. The silence that followed was so profound it was like a physical blow. It was a silence of pure, stunned disbelief. Then, the dam broke. Unacceptable, Lord Garrett roared, his face purple with rage. He had survived Dominic's silent purge, and his hatred had only festered. An Omega as Luna. It's an insult. She is weak, unfit, this has never been done. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Several other alphas nodded, their faces grim. A Luna must be a warrior. A diplomat, another shouted, what can this child offer the kingdom? Sierra flinched as if struck, but Dominic's grip on her hand tightened, a silent message of support. Then, another voice cut through the din. It was Vanessa. She stepped forward, her expression a mask of sorrowful concern. Her blue eyes were wide and pleading as she looked at Dominic. My king, she said, her voice trembling artfully, I beg you, reconsider. I speak not from jealousy, but from love for this kingdom. Aluna must inspire strength. She must be able to stand against our enemies. This girl, she's not worthy of you. She's not worthy of our people. Dominic's eyes turned to ice. The mate bond is not a choice. Vanessa, he said, his voice dangerously low, it is destiny, and you will address your queen with the respect she is due. The hall erupted into chaos. Alphas were shouting, some defending the king's right, others decrying the choice as a sign of weakness. Sierra felt the weight of hundreds of years of tradition, of prejudice, pressing down on her. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear. But then she looked at Dominic. He stood unmoving, a rock in the swirling tide of dissent, his eyes never leaving hers. He was defying his entire world for her. A tiny spark of defiance ignited within her. They thought she was weak, perhaps, but she was his, and he was hers. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and met the hostile glares of the crowd. She would not let them break her, not while he stood beside her. The public announcement was the spark that lit the pyre. Lord Garrett, emboldened by the widespread discontent, saw his opportunity. He left Blackwood Castle that very day, his mind set on treason. He traveled swiftly to his own lands, sending out secret summons to the Alphas he knew were most dissatisfied with Dominic's rule. They met in the dead of night, in the feasting hall of Garrett's grim, stone fortress. 5 Alphas, representing nearly a third of the Northern Territory's military might, answered his call. Dominic Blackwood is compromised, Garrett declared, his voice echoing in the torchlit hall. He has been bewitched by a weak-willed Omega. His judgment is flawed. He purges my best men, ignores the counsel of his Alphas, and now he seeks to place a servant on the Luna's throne. He's no longer fit to be king. His words found fertile ground. The other Alphas, proud and traditional, grumbled in agreement. They saw Dominic's choice as a stain on their honor, a weakening of their entire society. "What do you propose?" asked Alpha Kalen, a shrewd and ambitious leader from the western border. "I propose we remove him." Garrett said simply, "We march on Blackwood Castle. We challenge him. The old laws are on our side. A king who is proven unfit can be deposed. I will take the throne, and I will restore honor and strength to our lands." As they debated the logistics of their coup, a cloaked figure was admitted into the hall. The guards moved to block the intruder, but Garrett waved them off. "Let her pass. She's an ally." The figure lowered her hood. It was Vanessa. Her face was pale but resolute. "Lord Garrett," she said, her voice clear and steady, "your plan is sound. But Dominic is a formidable warrior. A direct assault will cost many lives, and you may still lose." "What is your point?" Girl Garrett grunted impatiently. "A king is only as strong as his queen," Vanessa said, her eyes glinting in the firelight, "while you and your forces create a diversion at the castle walls. I will get inside. I will reach the Omega. I will remove the source of his weakness. When Dominic discovers his precious mate is dead, he will be broken, consumed by grief. That is when you strike." Garrett let out a booming laugh. "The Beta's daughter has more steel in her than I thought. Very well. You help me dispose of the Omega, and when I am king, I will take you as my Luna. You will have the crown you so desire." It was a lie. Of course, Garrett had no intention of sharing his power, but Vanessa, blinded by desperation and a thirst for revenge, believed him. She nodded, a grim smile on her face. "It is agreed." In the shadows of her own mind, a voice whispered, a voice that was not her own. "Good, my child, very good. Let your hatred guide you." Morgana, miles away in her hidden lair, smiled. She had been subtly manipulating Vanessa's thoughts for weeks, stoking her jealousy, feeding her rage, pushing her down this path of treason. The rebellion was not Garrett's. It was hers, and it was all going according to plan. To quell the unrest, Dominic announced a grand royal dinner. It was a calculated risk, an attempt to present a united front, to show the world that Sierra was his unquestionable choice. All the lords and ladies who remained loyal were commanded to attend and pay their respects to their future Luna Queen. The atmosphere in the great hall was thick with a fragile, forced civility. Sierra sat beside Dominic on the dais, her heart pounding a nervous rhythm against her ribs. She felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, judging her every move. Vanessa moved through the tables with practiced grace, a silver pitcher in her hand. "Allow me," she said to the servants, her smile brilliant and disarming. "Tonight is a special night. As the Beta's daughter, it is my honor to serve our new Luna." No one questioned it. Her offer seemed a gesture of reconciliation, a sign that she had accepted her king's decision. She approached the royal table, her eyes fixed on Sierra. Dominic was engaged in a low, intense conversation with Marcus about the rebellious alphas, his attention momentarily diverted. This was her chance. "My Lady Luna," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false reverence as she bowed her head. "May I fill your cup?" Sierra, wanting to appear gracious, nodded with a small smile. "Thank you." Vanessa. Vanessa poured the deep red wine into Sierra's silver chalice. As she did, her thumb, holding the vial's tiny stopper, deftly released a few colorless, odorless drops into the stream of wine. It mixed instantly, leaving no trace. She placed the chalice before Sierra. "To your health and to the future of the kingdom," Vanessa said, raising her own cup in a toast. Sierra lifted the chalice. The moment stretched. The fate of the kingdom hung on the rim of that cup. But as she brought it to her lips, a sharp gasp came from beside the dais. It was Rose, the old servant, who had been watching with a worried expression. "My lady, wait!" Rose cried out, her voice thin with alarm. Everyone turned to look at her. "The wine," Rose stammered, pointing a trembling finger at Sierra's cup. I am old, but my nose is still sharp. There is something wrong with the scent. It is faint, but it is there. Something unnatural." Dominic's head snapped around. In a single, fluid motion, he was on his feet. His hand shot out and knocked the chalice from Sierra's grasp. It clattered across the table, spilling its dark contents onto the white tablecloth. Silence descended upon the hall. Dominic dipped a finger into the spilled wine and brought it cautiously to his tongue. His eyes widened, then narrowed into slits of pure fury. The taste was faint, almost undetectable, but his alpha senses picked it up. A bitter, chemical trace. Poison. His gaze, blazing with a terrifying golden fire, locked onto Vanessa. She paled, her mask of composure shattering. I don't understand," she stammered. "Only one person poured this wine." Dominic's voice was a low, deadly growl that promised death. He pointed a condemning finger at her. "You." "No," Vanessa cried, backing away. "It wasn't me. Someone must have tampered with the picture. I've been framed." But Rose stepped forward, her face grim. "I saw you. Miss Ashford, I saw you pour the wine for the Luna. No one else touched that chalice." Marcus Ashford stared at his daughter, his face a canvas of horror and disbelief. "Vanessa," he whispered, his heart breaking. "Vanessa Ashford," Dominic's voice boomed, filled with the cold wrath of a betrayed king. "You are charged with the attempted murder of the Luna Queen. That is high treason." He looked at his guards. "Seize her. Take her to the dungeons. I will pass judgment in the morning." The guards grabbed a hysterical. Screaming Vanessa, she continued to plead her innocence, her cries of "I was framed," "Please, Dominic, believe me," echoing through the silent, horrified hall as they dragged her away. Marcus fell to his knees before the throne. "Sire, my king, my daughter, I did not know. I swear on my life. I did not know. Dominic looked down at his oldest friend, his most trusted advisor, and saw only the pain of a father, but there was no softness in his eyes. There was only the cold, hard reality of betrayal. The enemy wasn't just at his gates, it was inside his own home. The dungeons of Blackwood Castle were a place of cold. Dripping stone and absolute despair, Vanessa was thrown into a cell, the heavy iron door slamming shut with a sound of finality. She collapsed onto the damp straw, her sobs echoing in the darkness. It was over. Everything was over. She had failed, and now she would die. Framed. Betrayed. She didn't understand how. The witch had promised. A faint ethereal light began to glow in the corner of her cell. It coalesced, taking the shape of a woman, the hooded figure from the woods. Such a disappointment, Lady Morgana's voice whispered, slithering out of the darkness. I gave you such a simple task. You, Vanessa scrambled back, pressing herself against the cold bars. This is your fault. You said it would be undetectable. They knew someone warned them. Morgana laughed, a sound like glass shattering. Oh, my dear, foolish child. It was never about succeeding. It was about you being caught. She stepped forward, the magical light illuminating her features for the first time. She was agelessly beautiful, with eyes as black as a starless night and a cruel twist to her lips. You see, your public attempt on the Luna's life, your subsequent arrest, it has created the perfect chaos. It has fractured Dominic's trust in his own inner circle. It has turned his beta against him. It is the perfect distraction for the real war to begin. Vanessa stared at her, confusion warring with a dawning, sickening horror. I don't understand. Morgana's smile was devoid of all warmth. She reached out a hand, not to touch, but as if admiring a piece of her own creation. It is time you knew the truth. My daughter. The word hung in the air. Daughter. No, Vanessa whispered, shaking her head. My father is Marcus Ashford. My mother is dead. Marcus Ashford is the fool who found you in the woods, Morgana sneered. I am the one who put you there. I am Lady Morgana, and I am your mother. Vanessa's world fractured. The truth was a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs, abandoned, a tool, her entire life, a lie. I bore you, Morgana continued, her voice cold and conversational. But you were a weakness, a chain to a past I needed to escape. So I left you, knowing that one day your connection to the Blackwood court would be busful. I have guided you, manipulated your little jealousies, fanned the flames of your ambition. You never truly loved Dominic. You loved the idea of his power. I merely nurtured that seed of greed. Tears streamed down Vanessa's face. It was true. A horrible, deep part of her knew it was true. Her obsession, her rage. It hadn't felt entirely her own. It had been a fever, a madness whispered into her soul. You were a perfect puppet, Morgana said, her voice turning sharp. But the play is over. Now, you will die in this cell, a disgraced traitor. Dominic will be distracted by your execution and his war with Garrett, and while he is fighting on two fronts, I will strike at the heart of his power. Please, Vanessa begged, the last of her pride shattering. Don't do this, Mother. The word was a plea, a desperate grasp for a connection that had never existed. Morgana's face twisted in disgust. Do not call me that. She began to fade, her form dissolving back into ethereal light. You have served your purpose. Goodbye, my little mistake. And then she was gone. Vanessa was left alone in the crushing darkness, the cold truth of her existence a far greater prison than the stone walls around her. She was not a lovelorn girl. She was not a master manipulator. She was a pawn, a discarded piece in a game she never knew she was playing, and she had been used to help destroy the very man she thought she loved. The attempt on Sierra's life threw the castle into a state of high alert. Dominic doubled the guard on the shadow tower, stationing his most elite warriors at every entrance. He trusted no one. The rebellion was brewing outside the walls, and a traitor had been found within. He felt as if he were standing on a crumbling cliff edge. His only solace was Sierra. The fear he'd seen in her eyes that night had been replaced by a quiet, determined strength. She was no longer just the frightened Omega. She was a Luna, and she was facing her new reality with a courage that humbled him. But Lord Garrett was not waiting for Dominic to consolidate his power. He knew the castle was in turmoil. Now was the time to strike, not with an army, but with a single, deadly blade. He hired a legendary assassin, a rogue known only as the Ghost, a werewolf who could move without sound and kill without a trace. His mission: infiltrate Blackwood Castle, get past the elite guard, and finish the job Vanessa had started. The night was moonless, a perfect shroud for dark deeds. The Ghost moved with supernatural stealth, scaling the sheer rock face below the shadow tower, a place the guards deemed inaccessible. He slipped through an unguarded window on a lower level, his movements silent as falling dust. He took out 2 guards with silver daggers to the throat before they could even make a sound, their bodies slumping to the floor without a whisper. Upstairs, Sierra was asleep, but a sudden, sharp spike of terror jolted her awake. It wasn't her own fear. Through her empathic sense, she felt a wave of pure, cold, killing intent. And it was close, very close. Her bedroom door creaked open. A dark figure, clad in black leather, slipped inside. She didn't scream. There was no time. She rolled off the far side of the bed, just as the assassin's blade sliced through the air where her throat had been moments before. She scrambled to her feet, grabbing the heavy silver candlestick from her bedside table. Her heart was hammering, but Dominic's training took over. Feet wide, low center of gravity. Never take your eyes off your opponent. The Ghost was surprised by her reaction, but recovered instantly. He lunged, his movements a blur. Sierra parried his knife with the candlestick, the clash of metal on metal ringing in the silent room. She was clumsy, terrified, but she was fighting. She used the skills Dominic had taught her, blocking and dodging, staying alive second by agonizing second. But she was no match for a seasoned killer. He feinted left, and she fell for it. As she moved to block, he spun, his other hand bringing a second dagger up in a vicious arc. The blade plunged deep into her abdomen. A cry of pure agony was torn from her lips. The candlestick fell from her nerveless fingers. She staggered back, clutching the wound as warmth spread across her stomach. The assassin raised his blade for the killing blow. Luna. The scream came from the doorway. It was Rose, who had heard the clash of metal and come to investigate. Her scream shattered the night. It was the only alarm Dominic needed. He was already moving, having felt the sharp, sudden severing of joy in their bond, replaced by a spike of pure agony. He burst into the room a second later, a black-furred demon of vengeance. His wolf was in complete control. He saw the assassin standing over Sierra's bleeding body, and the world went red. He didn't kill the Ghost. He tore him apart. It was brutal, primal, and over in seconds. Then he was at her side, shifting back to his human form, naked and covered in the assassin's blood. He gathered her into his arms, his hands pressing against the wound, trying in vain to stop the bleeding. "Sarah," he choked out, his voice breaking. "No, no, no, no." Her emerald eyes, glazed with pain, found his. "Dominic," she whispered, a faint, blood-flecked smile on her lips. Then her eyes rolled back in her head, and her body went limp in his arms. He held her close, a desperate, broken howl tearing from his throat, the sound of an alpha whose soul had just been ripped in two. The healers worked frantically, their faces grim. The assassin's blade had been coated in a slow-acting silver poison, designed to corrupt the wound and prevent healing. Sierra was alive, but only just. She hovered in a twilight state between life and death, her breathing shallow, her skin deathly pale. Dominic stood in the corner of the room, watching, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles were white. This was his fault, all of it. He had failed. He had sworn to protect her, and he had failed. He was no better than his father. Love had made him weak, had made him blind. And his mate was paying the price. A cold, terrifying resolve settled over him, the part of him that had softened, the part that had learned to smile and to love, was extinguished, buried under a thick layer of ice. If he wanted to save her, he couldn't be a mate. He had to be a king, a monster. When Sierra finally regained consciousness 2 days later, the first thing she saw was his face, but the warmth was gone. His amber eyes were as cold and hard as stone. "You are awake," he said. It wasn't a question. "Dominic," she whispered, her voice weak. She reached for his hand. He stepped back, out of her reach. The rejection was a physical blow. "The castle is no longer safe," he said, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "The rebellion is about to begin. I will not allow you to be put in danger again." What are you saying?" she asked, a knot of fear tightening in her chest. "You will remain here, in the shadow tower," he decreed. "The guards will be tripled. No one will be allowed to see you, not even Rose. Your meals will be delivered by a guard who will not speak to you. You will not leave this room, not for any reason." The words struck her, each one colder than the last. "You're making me a prisoner again," she said, her voice trembling with disbelief and hurt. A real prisoner this time. "I am keeping you alive," he corrected her, his gaze unwavering. "Your presence is a liability I cannot afford during a war. You are my one weakness, Sierra, and I intend to remove it until the threat is eliminated." Tears welled in her eyes. "But I can help. I can stand with you." "You will stay here," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. "It is better to be my prisoner than to be in your grave." He turned and walked towards the door, his back rigid. "Dominic, please," she cried. "Don't do this. Don't shut me out." He paused at the door, but he did not turn around. "When this is over," he said, his voice a remote, hollow echo, "we will see what is left." And then he was gone. The heavy door was closed, and she heard the sound of a key turning in the lock, followed by the heavy thud of a bar being dropped into place. Sierra lay in the bed, the silence of the room pressing in on her. He had not just locked her in a room, he had locked her out of his heart, and the cold, empty cage he had built around her felt far more deadly than any assassin's blade. 2 weeks of absolute solitude followed, 2 weeks of silence, broken only by the brief, impersonal appearance of a guard who would leave her food and depart without a word. The vibrant mate bond that had connected her soul to Dominic's was now a dull, aching void. He had severed their connection, shielding his emotions from her completely. The silence from him was a constant, screaming pain. She was beginning to lose hope, sinking into a listless despair, when the lock on her door turned at an unexpected hour. It was Rose. The old servant hurried in, her face etched with worry and defiance. "I could not bear it any longer," Rose whispered, pressing a small bundle into Sierra's hands. "To see you locked away like this, to see the king turning himself to stone, it is wrong." "Rose, you'll be in terrible trouble," Sierra said, her voice hoarse from disuse. "What more can they do to an old woman?" Rose said with a sad smile. "Child, there is something you must know, something about Queen Elise." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "The official story is that she took her own life out of grief. It is a lie." Sierra stared at her. "What?" "The queen did not die of a broken heart," Rose said, her eyes flashing with an old anger. "She was poisoned, slowly, over many weeks, by a traitor in the court. The king's grief for his father blinded him to her illness until it was too late. The traitor was caught and executed, but before he died, he confessed. He said he was working for someone else, a witch who had been exiled years before. A witch, the cold, watching presence Sierra had felt in the woods. Who was she? He never gave a name, Rose said grimly, but Queen Elise, she suspected. She knew something was wrong. She left a message. She told me she hid the most important pages of her diary, in case something happened to her. Rose pointed to the bundle in Sierra's lap. Here. She entrusted them to me before she died. I think it is time you read them. After Rose had gone, Sierra unwrapped the bundle with trembling fingers. Inside were the missing pages from Queen Elise's journal. The script was rushed, frantic, a stark contrast to the elegant writing in the front of the book. She read, her eyes flying across the page. Dominic grows stronger every day, but I fear for him. A shadow from our past has returned. Morgana, the witch his father exiled. I feel her dark magic poisoning the edges of our lives. Alaric believes she is long dead, but I know she is not. She swore she would have her revenge on the House of Blackwood. She swore she would destroy everything he loved. The next entry was even more chilling. The poison is in me now. I am growing weaker. I have tried to warn Alaric, but he will not listen. He believes my grief is making me paranoid. If you are reading this, if my worst fears have come true, I beg you, warn my son. Morgana's hatred is patient. It is a poison that will seep into the foundations of this kingdom. She will not stop until she has taken everything from him, just as she believes he took everything from her. Sierra dropped the pages, her heart pounding. Morgana. The witch was real, and she was behind everything, the poisoning, the rebellion, Vanessa's betrayal. She was the puppet master, pulling all the strings. Then, she read the final lines Queen Elise had written. Her last words meant for an unknown reader. To whoever finds this, know that the true strength of Aluna is not in the sword she wields, but in the hearts she can unite. It is not a power of force, but a power of healing. That is our greatest weapon. The words resonated deep in Sierra's soul. A power of healing. She thought of her own secret gift, the ability to feel the emotions of others. She had always seen it as a curse, a burden that made her vulnerable. But what if Queen Elise was right? What if it was a weapon? A fire she thought had been extinguished began to burn within her once more. Dominic had locked her away, thinking she was a weakness. He was wrong. She was his greatest strength. He was out there, preparing to fight a war of muscle and steel, blind to the real enemy who was attacking his kingdom from the inside out. She would not sit in this tower and wait to be rescued. She would not be a damsel in distress. She was Aluna, and it was time to save her king. The blood moon rose, staining the clouds a sickening crimson. At its zenith, Lord Garrett's army attacked. 5 packs, a sea of snarling wolves and battle-hardened warriors, crashed against the walls of Blackwood Castle. The siege had begun. Dominic stood on the ramparts, a grim figure in black armor. He was the king, the commander, the alpha. He directed his warriors with cold, precise efficiency, his mind a whirlwind of strategy, but his heart was a block of ice. He had walled it off, locked away the pain of Sierra's injury and his own self-blame. He shifted into his massive black wolf form and leaped into the fray, a whirlwind of claws and teeth. He fought with a terrifying, reckless fury, his only goal to kill, to destroy the enemies who had threatened his mate beside him. Marcus Ashford fought with the desperation of a man seeking redemption, his silver-backed wolf a bulwark against the tide of rebels. But they were outnumbered. For every rebel they took down, 2 more seemed to take their place. The loyalist line was beginning to buckle. Inside the Shadow Tower, Sierra heard the sounds of battle, the clash of steel, the snarls of wolves, the cries of the wounded. Each sound was a dagger in her heart. With Rose's help, She found a rusty key to a forgotten servant's passage. Her wound still ached, but she ignored the pain. She had to get to him. She emerged into the chaotic courtyard just as another figure stumbled out of the castle's side entrance. It was Vanessa. Her fine gown was torn and filthy, her face streaked with grime. She had used a hidden pin to pick the lock of her cell, a last gift from Morgana meant for her to take her own life. Instead, she had used it to free herself. Their eyes met across the chaos. For a moment, hatred flashed between them. Then, Vanessa saw the determination in Sierra's face, and her own expression crumbled into one of desperate urgency. "You have to listen to me," Vanessa gasped, running to her. Sierra flinched back, but Vanessa grabbed her arm. "I know I don't deserve your trust. I don't deserve to be forgiven. But he's in danger. It's not just Garrett. There's a witch. Her name is Morgana." Sierra stared at her, shocked. "How do you know that name?" "She came to me in the dungeon," Vanessa said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "She's my mother. She abandoned me as a baby. She manipulated me, used my jealousy to start this war. She wants to destroy Dominic. She's here." Sierra hiding, waiting for the right moment to strike. A sudden, unexpected alliance was forged in the heat of battle. Two women who had been bitter rivals, now united by a common enemy. "She wants Dominic broken," Vanessa said, her eyes filled with a horrible clarity. "She wants him to lose you. That is her ultimate revenge." Sierra's resolve hardened. She knew what she had to do. She wasn't just fighting for her own life, or for Dominic's. She was fighting for the soul of their kingdom. Sierra ran onto the battlefield, a small, determined figure amidst the brutal chaos. Dominic, in his wolf form, saw her. A wave of pure terror and fury washed through him. "Hey, Sierra," his voice roared through their mind link. "The first contact in weeks. I commanded you to stay in the tower. Get back." "I can't let you fight this alone," she sent back, her mental voice shaking but resolute. Just then, a sound cut through the din of battle. It was a laugh, a cold, chilling laugh that seemed to echo from the very stones of the castle. A figure emerged from the shadows of the forest edge. It was Lady Morgana, her black robe swirling around her like smoke. She held a gnarled staff of dark wood, its top pulsing with a sickly purple light. "At last," her voice boomed, amplified by magic, the end of the House of Blackwood. "My revenge is at hand." She raised her staff, and a wave of dark energy shot into the loyalist ranks. Warriors cried out, clutching their heads as illusions of their worst fears materialized around them. Others simply collapsed, their life force drained away. Dominic roared in fury and charged. A black thunderbolt aimed at the witch, but Morgana merely smiled. She slammed her staff into the ground, and a wall of crackling black fire erupted. Blocking his path, he was thrown back, his fur singed. "You pathetic child," Morgana sneered. "Did you really think you could defeat me? I have waited 20 years for this. I watched your father die, and now I will watch you lose everything you hold dear." Seeing Dominic injured, seeing the despair on the faces of his warriors, Sierra felt their pain as if it were her own, through the mate bond. Dominic's agony was a physical fire in her chest. Her empathic sense, raw and overwhelmed, was flooded with the fear, hatred, and pain of the entire battlefield. It was too much. It felt like her soul was being torn apart. But then, Queen Elise's words echoed in her mind. "The true strength of a Luna is in the hearts she can unite." Instead of shutting the feelings out, she opened herself to them, all of them, and something inside her broke free. A soft silver light began to glow from her body, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. It wasn't an aggressive power, but a soothing one. The warriors, caught in Morgana's illusions, suddenly found the horrific images fading, replaced by a feeling of courage and hope. The pained cries of the wounded lessened. Dominic stared at her in awe. She was glowing. This was her true power. She wasn't just an empath. She was a heart weaver, the last of a rare and ancient line of Omegas whose power was not of the body, but of the soul. They could connect, soothe, and heal the emotional wounds of the pack. She stepped into the center of the battlefield, unarmed and unafraid, her voice, amplified not by magic but by her own innate power, rang out across the field. "You are fighting for the wrong reasons," she called out to the rebel forces. "You fight because of pride and prejudice, lies fed to you by a man who seeks only power. Lord Garrett does not care for you or your packs." She focused her power, not attacking, but connecting. She reached into the hearts of the rebel alphas, letting them feel her sincerity, letting them feel the truth of her words. They faltered, the bloodlust in their eyes replaced by confusion. Just then, Vanessa stepped forward from the castle gates, holding a satchel of scrolls. "She's right," Vanessa shouted, her voice raw. "I found these in Garrett's tent before I was captured, our correspondence. He made a deal with the southern packs to cede your lands to them in exchange for their support after he took the throne. He was going to betray you all." The revelation hit the rebel alphas like a physical blow. Betrayed, used as cannon fodder, their righteous rebellion was nothing but a power grab by a traitor. With a collective roar of fury, they turned, but their target was no longer Dominic's men. It was Lord Garrett. Lord Garrett found himself surrounded. His allies had become his enemies. He was trapped. With a snarl of pure hatred, he shifted, his mangy gray wolf form lunging not at his former allies, but at the one he blamed for everything Dominic. The two alphas crashed together in a brutal flurry of teeth and claws. It was a fight of raw, unrestrained fury. They tore at each other, their powerful bodies slamming against the muddy ground. Both were quickly covered in wounds, their blood staining the earth. "You think you can rule with love?" Garrett snarled through the mind link, his jaws snapping inches from Dominic's throat. "It has made you weak." Dominic threw him off, his golden eyes blazing. "No," he growled back, "I rule with strength, but for the first time, I am fighting for love." With a final, powerful surge, Dominic's jaws closed around Garrett's throat. There was a sickening crunch, and the rebellion was over. But the true battle was not. Morgana, seeing her plans of a drawn-out war crumble, let out a shriek of pure rage. If she could not have her slow, painful revenge, she would settle for a swift, devastating one. "If I cannot break your heart, I will simply tear it from your chest," she screamed. She raised her staff, pouring all of her dark power into one final spell, a curse of pure necrotic energy, a bolt of absolute death. The death curse, she shrieked, and a beam of crackling black light shot from her staff, aimed directly at Dominic. He was injured, exhausted, and had no time to react. No. Sierra moved. She didn't think. She just acted. She threw herself in front of Dominic, her small body intercepting the curse. The black light struck her. It didn't explode. It was absorbed. And a spider web of black veins instantly spread across her skin. The silver glow around her flickered and died. She collapsed, falling into Dominic's arms. "Sierra," he cried, his voice a raw sound of agony. Why would you do that?" She looked up at him, her beautiful green eyes already dimming. A small, pained smile touched her lips. "Because I love you," she whispered, her voice fading. "It's Aluna's job, to protect her alpha." The mate bond, the vibrant connection that had become the center of his world, began to fray, the light within it flickering like a dying candle. From the edge of the woods, Morgana laughed, a triumphant, ugly sound. She began to chant again, preparing another spell to finish the job. But she never got the chance. Vanessa, watching in horror, saw her moment. This was it, her one chance at redemption. She launched herself at Morgana, tackling her with all her strength. "You abandoned me! You used me!" Vanessa screamed, wrapping her arms around the witch in a desperate embrace. "I won't let you hurt anyone else." Before Morgana could react, Vanessa pulled the small silver dagger she had taken from the assassin's body. With a final, choked sob, she plunged it deep into Morgana's side, the blade sinking through both of their bodies. "Silver was poison to dark magic!" Morgana shrieked as her power unraveled, her physical form dissolving into black smoke and screaming shadows. Vanessa collapsed to the ground, the same mortal wound in her own side, her final act one of selfless sacrifice. Dominic held Sierra's cold body, his world collapsing into a single point of unbearable pain. The pack healers rushed to them, but one look at the black veins spreading from her chest and they stopped, their faces filled with despair. "My king," the chief healer said, his voice grave. "It is the death curse. There is no cure." "No," Dominic roared, his grief turning to rage. "There must be something." Marcus, his face streaked with tears for his fallen daughter and his dying queen, knelt beside them. "Healer, is there nothing?" The healer hesitated. "There is one legend, an old wives' tale. It says the curse can only be broken by a life force more powerful than the death magic itself. It would require a complete marking bond. The Alpha must pour his own life essence into the Luna to push the darkness out." Dominic's heart seized, but she never formally accepted the bond. "I have not marked her." "Then it is too late," the healer said grimly. "No!" Dominic's voice was iron. He looked down at Sierra's pale, beautiful face. He would not lose her. He would not let her sacrifice be in vain. It was a terrible risk. Forcing a marking on an unconscious mate could shatter their bond, or even kill them both. But it was their only hope. "Forgive me, my love," he whispered. He bent his head and sank his fangs into the juncture of her neck and shoulder. It wasn't a bite of possession, but of desperation. He didn't just mark her skin. He opened a conduit between their souls. He pushed his life force, his raw alpha power, his very essence into her, fighting back against the encroaching darkness. The mate bond, which had been flickering, exploded with light, a brilliant, blinding light of gold and silver intertwined. His alpha power merged with her latent heartweaver energy. The result was miraculous. A wave of warm, healing energy pulsed out from them, spreading across the entire battlefield. The black veins on Sierra's skin receded, dissolving into nothing. Her wound knitted itself closed across the field. The injuries of the loyalist and rebel warriors alike began to heal, the magic soothing their pain and mending their flesh. The death curse was not just broken, it was annihilated. Sierra's eyelids fluttered. She took a deep, shuddering breath, and her emerald eyes opened, clear and bright. She looked up at Dominic, her fingers coming up to touch the fresh mark on her neck. You marked me," she whispered. Tears, the first he had shed since childhood, streamed down his face. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I didn't ask. I couldn't lose you." She gave him a soft, radiant smile. "I accept you." "Dominic Blackwood," she said, her voice full of love. "I always have." He lowered his head and kissed her, a kiss of relief, of reunion, of a bond now whole and unbreakable. Later, they went to where Vanessa lay. The healers had stabilized her, but she was weak, her life fading. Sierra knelt beside her and took her hand. "I'm sorry," Vanessa whispered, her eyes filled with regret. "For everything." "I forgive you," Sierra said softly, "and thank you. You saved us all." Sierra focused, calling on the gentle, healing power that now flowed freely through her. She couldn't mend a wound so mortal, but she could soothe the pain and grant peace. A soft silver light flowed from her hands into Vanessa. The wound began to close, not completely, but enough. Vanessa would live, but the healers confirmed that the combination of the magical feedback from Morgana's death and Sierra's healing had severed her connection to her wolf. She would survive as a human, a fitting, merciful punishment for her crimes. It was a second chance. 3 days later, the Great Hall was once again assembled. This time, it was for a trial. The surviving rebels, their heads bowed, stood before the throne, awaiting their king's judgment. They expected death or exile. Dominic sat on the throne, no longer alone, cold monarch. Sierra sat beside him in a newly carved chair, a silver circlet on her brow. She was his Luna, his equal. They faced the crowd together. He allowed the charges to be read. Then he looked to Sierra. She stood, her gaze sweeping over the defeated warriors. "You have committed treason," she said, her voice clear and strong, resonating with her quiet power. "You followed a traitor and raised arms against your king, but you were also deceived. Your fears and your pride were used against you." Then Dominic spoke, his voice the familiar, authoritative baritone, but it was tempered with a wisdom that had not been there before. "For your crimes, justice demands a heavy price," he declared, "but your Luna preaches mercy. Therefore, this is my decree. All who lay down their arms and renew their oath of fealty to the crown will be pardoned. You will return to your lands and help rebuild what you have helped to break." A collective sigh of relief went through the crowd. "However," Dominic continued, his voice hardening, "the ringleaders who conspired with Garrett from the beginning, those whose ambition outweighed their honor, will be stripped of their rank and exiled to the southern wastelands. We will have unity in this kingdom, but it will be a unity built on loyalty, not fear." It was a new kind of justice, a perfect blend of his strength and her compassion. The remaining alphas dropped to one knee, their loyalty now absolute, given not out of fear, but out of genuine respect. They had a king worth fighting for and a queen worth dying for. Later, Marcus Ashford came to Dominic, offering his resignation as Beta. "I failed you, my king, my daughter." Dominic placed a hand on his old friend's shoulder. "Your daughter found redemption in her final moments, and you fought by my side when it mattered most. I need my Beta. Marcus, stay. Help me build this new era." Marcus looked at his king, his eyes filled with gratitude, and nodded. Vanessa, now fully recovered but wolfless, was brought before them. She expected to be banished. Instead, Sierra offered her a position organizing the royal library. "A second chance," Sierra said simply. "Use it well." Vanessa, humbled and changed, accepted. The desire for power had been burned out of her, replaced by a quiet desire for peace. On the next full moon, a grand ceremony was held, not in the stuffy Great Hall, but outside, on the high bluffs overlooking the Black Moon Forest, under the watchful eye of the moon goddess herself. All 12 packs of the Northern Territories were gathered, a sea of werewolves united as one. Dominic stood on a platform of white stone. He wore not a crown, but his black battle armor, the golden wolf symbol gleaming on his chest. Sierra stood beside him, radiant in a simple gown of silver-white cloth. On her head was the delicate silver and moonstone crown that had belonged to Queen Elise. In a move that shocked everyone, Dominic turned to her and knelt on one knee. "Before our people and our goddess," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he took her hand. "I, Dominic Blackwood, swear this vow. Sierra Flynn is my Luna Queen, my heart, the other half of my soul. I swear to protect her, to honor her, and to love her until my last breath is drawn." He slipped a ring onto her finger. It was a simple silver band, set with a single, flawless emerald that matched her eyes. Tears welled in Sierra's eyes as she gently urged him to his feet. She took his hands in hers. "And I swear to stand beside you, Dominic," she replied, her voice ringing with a newfound confidence. "Not behind you, not in front of you, but with you. I will be the heart when you are the sword. I will be the healer when you are the shield. Together, we will rule not just with strength, but with compassion." They turned to face each other, and in a ritual as old as time, they renewed their marking bite, a gentle press of fangs that sent a dazzling pulse of light through their mate bond, so powerful that every werewolf for miles could feel the love and strength of their Alpha and Luna. As the thousands of werewolves gathered on the bluff pointed their muzzles to the sky, a single howl began, then another, then thousands, a chorus of joy and fealty that shook the very mountains, welcoming their new queen. 6 months later, the kingdom was transformed. The scars of the rebellion were healing, both on the land and in the hearts of its people. Under the joint rule of Dominic and Sierra, a new era of balance had begun. Sierra established the Heart Council, a revolutionary assembly where Omegas and Betas had a voice alongside the Alphas. Ensuring the laws were fair to all, the old oppressive prejudices began to crumble. Dominic, still a fearsome warrior and a shrewd king, now ruled with a wisdom and patience he had never known before. One evening, he and Sierra stood on the balcony of the Shadow Tower, which was no longer a prison, but their private chambers. The air was cool and smelled of pine. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly, leaning her head against his chest. "Being bound to me, an Omega." He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "Never," he murmured into her hair. "You taught me that true strength isn't having no weakness, it's having something worth being weak for. You are not my weakness. Sierra, you are my reason." He tilted her chin up and kissed her, a slow, deep kiss filled with the quiet comfort of a love that was now as steady and constant as the moon above. In the royal library, Vanessa found a quiet peace she had never known. The lust for power had been replaced by a love for stories. A young, kind-hearted warrior named Ryan. A captain of the guard often found excuses to visit her there. He didn't care about her past. He only saw the quiet, intelligent woman she had become. For the first time, Vanessa was learning what it felt like to be loved for who she was, not for what she could offer. A few weeks later, Sierra found herself feeling tired, a strange bout of nausea greeting her each morning. The pack healer examined her, a wide, knowing smile spreading across his face. "There's nothing wrong. My queen," he announced happily. "In fact, everything is perfectly right. Congratulations, you are with child." The joy that burst through Sierra was so pure and bright, it was overwhelming. She ran from the medical wing, searching for Dominic. She found him in the training yard, sparring with Marcus. "Dominic," she called out, breathless. He turned, a smile gracing his lips at the sight of her, but his smile faded to a look of concern when he saw the tears in her eyes. He was at her side in an instant. "What is it? Are you all right?" She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. She looked up at him, her green eyes shining. "You're going to be a father." For the second time in his life, Dominic Blackwood was speechless. He stared at her, then at his hand on her stomach, and a look of such profound, utter joy transformed his face that it took her breath away. He swept her up into his arms, burying his face in her neck, his body shaking with silent, happy sobs. "I promise you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "I promise our child will grow up in a kingdom of peace. They will never know the fear that we did." The final scene of their story unfolds in the Queen's Garden. Dominic and Sierra sit on a stone bench, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. His hand rests protectively on her belly, where the heir to the Northern Territories is growing. Sierra is reading aloud from the last, treasured page of Queen Elisa's journal, the one addressed to her. To my future daughter. She reads softly, "Never let anyone tell you that love is a weakness. Love is the shield, the sword, and the banner under which we fight. It is the fiercest, most powerful magic of all. Love my son, heal his wounds, and teach him how to be a king who is not only feared, but loved." She looks up at Dominic, a gentle smile on her lips. "I think she knew you would find someone like me." Dominic leans over and kisses her forehead. "My mother," he says, his voice full of a love he has finally made peace with, "was always wiser than I ever knew." Together, they watch as the sun dips below the horizon and the first stars appear, heralding the rise of the moon. Their kingdom is safe, their family is beginning, and their love story, once written in shadows and fear, is now an echo that will last for eternity,